So IPFS, the system, as you know, that where you can have the CID. You can request a file, and your request goes somewhere into the network, and you can talk to one of the providers of the file, and hopefully you receive the file. The problem is that, if you have the regular URLs, and there is a video at YouTube, so you have the URL like youtube.com/video, you know that YouTube hosts this file. With the CIDs, you really don't. If you have only the CIDs, you don't know who hosts this file in the network. So for the whole system to work, you require kind of a CID resolution system where you provide the CID, and then you retrieve the list of providers who host the specific file to be able to contact them and get the file. And IPFS has two ways of doing it. The first one is using bitswap. So bitswap is very simple. You just have, when you launch IPFS client, you connect to some peers. It's usually around 300. And then if you want to get a CID, you just send a request to every single peer via bitswap. If they have the file, they give it to you. If they don't, well, they don't. It's pretty fast and simple. However, it's expensive, and the main problem is that it's not guaranteed to find the specific file. So even if the file is in the network, but none of your peers has the file, you will not find it. So the second solution is the distributed hash table, which is slightly slower. However, it's still efficient because you're guaranteed to find the content if it's in the network, and you can find the specific content within log n steps, where n is the size of the network. We're going to focus in this talk only on the DHT. So one more introduction to the DHT, very simple. When you join the IPFS network, you will generate a public private key pair. Then you can hash this key, and this hash of the key will be your identifier in the IPFS network and will basically determine your positioning on the SHA-256 hash space of the network. And if everyone does it, everyone will generate a random key, so we have kind of perfectly uniform or equally distributed hash space. And the DHT allows us to go to a specific place in the DHT, so I can say, hi, I want to go to this hash in the hash space, and the DHT provides this routing mechanism that by contacting at most log n nodes, you just go to the specific region, and you're guaranteed to find the peers in the network that are closest to the specific place on the hash space. And IPFS uses this for this content resolution. So now, if I'm a provider and I would like to and I would like to tell the world that I host a specific file, I create a CID. The CID also is placed somewhere on this SHA-256 hash space. I will use the DHT routing to go to this hash space. I'll discover k closest nodes to the specific CID. In IPFS, it's 20. Here I'm using 4 because it's easier. And basically, I will then contact all those k nodes and will tell them, hey, I'm the provider for this file. And then if there is another provider for the same file, it will do the same thing. So first of all, it will find the CID, will go to this region, discover k closest peers, and tell them, hey, I have the file. If everyone does this, now those k closest nodes to the specific CID will just host this mapping between the CID and a list of providers. And now if someone wants to get the file, again, we have the CID, we know where it is in the hash space, we discover the same k closest nodes, we ask them, hey, who has this file? And hopefully we'll receive a list of the providers. And then we can just, having this information, we can just contact the provider directly, get the file. OK. So IPFS is an open system, which is great, but also comes with some challenges. So now if I'm an attacker, I can create some Sybil identities. And those identities, again, will be placed based on their public-private key pair, but I can just keep producing public keys so they suit my needs. And it's actually pretty easy to just generate brute force, basically, private keys so that their hashes will end up close to the topic hash. And if the attack succeeds, the attacker can basically place the Sybil identities close to the topic hash. And if that works, well, now k closest nodes are controlled by the attacker. And this is problematic because now every single time there's a provider and want to say, hey, I have this file, what will talk uniquely to those malicious nodes, and they can simply drop this information. And if someone wants to now retrieve this file, again, it will discover K-closest nodes, which now are malicious, and they can just say the file is not found. There is no one providing this file. This is even more problematic because even if the file is very popular and there are thousands of nodes hosting this file, as long as I'm able to eclipse those K nodes, the file becomes unavailable in the network. And if I place those symbols right away before the providers advertise them, the attack is instantaneous, so it works right away. If not, if I place my symbols after the file was advertised, it takes some time because we've seen from the previous talk that honest nodes will keep the records for 24 hours. So basically, after 24 hours, only the malicious nodes will have the information who has the specific file, and the file gets eclipsed. Right, so this is problematic because with a single laptop, generating those 20 malicious peers takes around half a minute on this laptop, which is not great because with a single laptop, I can basically eclipse any file on IPFS network. So we were wondering how we can detect this attack first. So if we have a perfectly random keys and only honest nodes, they will be uniformly distributed on the hash space. However, if the attacker wants to launch an attack, it will have to place the Sybil identities closer to the specific topic hash. And if that happens, well, we'll see the distribution will be different because we have this region near the CID that becomes more dense, and the distances between the CID, the peer IDs will be much shorter. So obviously, as a node, we don't have a global view of the network. However, we have a view of the peer ID distribution as we go towards the specific CID. So here with the blue dots, you can see the regular distribution when there is no attack, and then with the red dots, you have the distribution when there is an attack launched against a specific CID. So you can see that they're very different. And because of that, we're looking for kind of a metric that will tell me whether there is an attack or not based only on the CIDs or the peer ID distribution that I perceive while going to a specific CID. And for that, we use KL divergence. You don't have to dive into the math, but basically this is something that I can give two distributions, and it will give me a number, which is a distance between those distributions. If the KL divergence is large, it means that those two distributions are very different. If it's low, it means that they're basically the same. So what we do, we will need, first of all, to estimate the network size. This we can do pretty securely, and then calculate the ideal distribution that we expect to see if we have a uniform distribution of the peer IDs. And then we go to a specific CID, and then we compare the ideal distribution with the one that we perceived. Here on this graph, you can see that those are the red dots are our walks toward a CID that is eclipsed, and blue nodes are our walks towards towards a CID that is not eclipsed. And on the y-axis, you have the KL divergence. So you can see that the red dots are basically on the top part of the graph, and the blue ones are on the bottom. So if we set the threshold correctly, we can basically tell whether there is an attack or not. And with some tuning, we were able to get false negative rate of 0% and false positives only on around 1%. OK, so with this, yes?
What sort of tuning?
Sorry, say again?
You said that with some tuning, we were able to get these quite nice results in terms of false positives and negatives. And I'm wondering, what kind of tuning?
Right, so there's basically, the tuning is only about setting this threshold. So you will see, because we have to say, OK, above the KL divergence higher than whatever, but you can basically do it empirically, and it's based only on the network size. Right, so we know that there is an attack, but what we can do about it. So this is still work in progress, but basically we would like to solve it when advertising the file only. So now if I have a file, I advertise it, I go to the CID, I check the distribution seems off. So what I can do, I can just go slightly away from this eclipsed region, and basically give this information to the original honest nodes that should receive this information. And again, I can verify it using the KL divergence. The good thing about it is that on the searcher side, we don't have to do anything, because while we go towards this specific CID, we should be crossing those honest nodes, and they will just tell me, if you want to go closer, that's fine, but I have this information, I can give it to you. You don't have to go towards this eclipsed region in the network. And yeah, I think this is it from me. So basically what we're doing, we're now confirming that every single time when you are looking for a file, you will go through those honest nodes. If that works, we're basically good to go. My colleague Naveen will give a demo tomorrow about it. So he runs eclipsing CIDs as a service. If you want a file to be eclipsed, just let us know. Thank you.
Did you tune that threshold so that your false negative rate was 0, basically? Was that what your optimality condition was for the KL threshold?
Yes, so basically we're kind of looking for a good balance between
You'll
both.
accept false positives, but you will not accept false negatives.
Right,
You don't want
so
to miss any. You don't want to miss any attacks, but you will accept things that weren't actually attacks.
Right, I think it also depends on we are not still set on the actual response. And I think then, if the response is more harsh, you might want you'll care more about false negatives rather than false positives, and vice versa, depending on what you do after yeah, exactly.
Hi, good talk. There was one slide where you showed that the false negatives was 0%. Is that provably always 0, or was that empirical data?
Sorry, say again, I didn't get that.
So is the 0 false negatives empirical, or will it always be 0?
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
this was like we set a threshold, and with the threshold that we chose, that's the result we got. But as I said, this threshold we kind of tuned it because we still don't know whether we care more about false positives or false negatives, because that depends on the exact response that you want to have to this attack.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. So you detect this using the KL divergence on the distributions, but it sounds to me like you need a crawl of the entire network to detect this.
No, so we do it on the distribution as it is perceived while going to the specific CID. So here on this graph, you can see that this is a distribution of the peers I perceive while going to the CID. So those are only the peers I contact. So I don't need the global view of the network.
Exactly, that's, yeah, nice, okay.
When you go back to the previous graph,
This one?
Yeah, that one. Why are there these horizontal lines? Could you explain that in this KL divergence?
Horizontal lines, the red line.
Yeah, the red dots form this
This is just
frequency.
the threshold that we set, basically saying above.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. My
seems to form
guess would
clusters.
be that this will be some property of KL divergence.
Okay, yeah.
That is kind of discrete, but I don't have a good answer now.
That's enough for me. Thanks.
Okay, good.
That's very interesting and promising result. And so I think what you have now is you can detect an attack, right? And then there's a mitigation. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be even possible to do something better. So when you provide your keys, so you're going to do a lookup for the spot where you want to store your keys. Mm-hmm. And here you can detect the density. And if at this moment you detect an attack, then you publish it to a lot of peers, right? Because there's going to be the attacker, but you want to give it to the honest peers that were there from the start.
Right.
And so you don't need to constantly monitor, right?
Right, so that's the thing. We wanted to avoid being forced to kind of constantly monitor all my keys that I published. There is always a trade-off because obviously the more people you give your information to, the better. Like it's more secure, but at the same time, well, it increases the overhead of the network. We're also thinking on storing those records on the path, because currently you're using kind of find node operation to go to discover the closest nodes, and then you give them the information. So we use add provider. However, it would be asking everyone on the path towards the CID. So that
I mean, then the content routing isn't sound. If it's asking on the path, then it's hard to find.
Right. But I mean, you still go towards the specific CID, right? So you still give it to those like k closest nodes, but then the closer you get, and still we have to model that. But especially for popular files, it should give us enough information spread across the network that. I mean, the good thing about it is that then you don't have any additional overhead because you just talk to the nodes that you contact anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think so. If you do first the lookup to store the provider record and you detect that there is an anomaly, then you can look up for some more peer until you're satisfied with the number. And
sure.
Then you allocate them, so you allocate more provider record than actually 20. And so maybe it can be combined with optimistic provide. And so the number of provider records depend on the density of this specific location of the key space. And I think so that's just very strong, and we don't need to monitor, and it just makes it strong, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
How sensitive is that to the accuracy of the network size estimation? So how accurate
of the network size?
So you say, so this all
Right.
depends on the network size, and you are estimating that, and how accurate does this need to be?
So it doesn't have to be extremely accurate because, again, this depends on the threshold, so there are a lot of moving parts. But we've run it on multiple traces acquired by the crawler that I guess you wrote. And so we basically go to a random key in the network, and based on the distribution, we're able to estimate the network size. And we were off by around 2-3% from all the runs that we had.
As another idea to avoid relying on the network size, so what you're doing when you insert a provider record is that you explore the region close to that CID in the hash space. And you already know the region close to your own ID in the hash space. Mm-hmm. And you could compare those distributions. And then you don't need to rely on the network size because you know the density in your proximity. Maybe. Hopefully not.
Yeah, that's something to look at. You probably also have, because I think now we looked, so here we were kind of looking globally, it would be good to check whether, if you're like closer to the CID, it's more difficult to detect the attack.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was just here wondering what is the real cost to set up this attack, okay? So if I understood correctly, you can eclipse any CID if you have 20 symbols that are the closest in the network with that identifier. But identifiers are derived from public key pairs, which are verified whenever you interact with the node to establish the secure connection. Which means that in practice, you have to have a huge database of public-private key pairs and peer IDs, such that you can fetch 20 which are closest to your target. Is that it?
Right,
or it's just that we messed up and we forget to verify the key when we establish a communication channel?
But I still have, so I have both the private and public key, right? Like I generate private key. So basically what we do, we just fetch the closest node to the specific CID, and then I just generate random key. I check if it's like closer to the CID. So I then have like both private and public keys, so I can establish the secure connection with anyone.
Maybe that's what we are going to show tomorrow. We could have like a Hydra node that has a huge database of public, private keys and peer IDs. And then I decide, okay, I will eclipse everything around this identifier. I pick up the right identities. I make my bad Hydra present itself to the network with that identity. Done. And we killed that segment of the network.
Sorry, I wasn't sure about the second part.
I was just trying to understand how this could be like operationalized to make the attack like extremely effective. But well, okay.
I think, so now you wanna take it?
Yeah, we will see tomorrow, but within half a minute to a minute, we have a functioning attack. So it's very easy, basically.
Yeah, the brute forcing is pretty quick. So at the beginning we're trying to paralyze it, but then it takes half a minute, so probably not worth it.
Okay. Hi. Hi. Thank you for the talk. I was wondering, you were saying that your idea was to mitigate this was to store the CID on the path, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Have you checked how deterministic is the path when you?
Have I checked what? Sorry.
Deterministic is the path. When you try
Right. So
to
it's the further away you are from the CID, the less deterministic it is, because you're kind of guaranteed in the buckets close to the specific CID that you will have more or less the same nodes, and the further away you get, the less deterministic is it. Although with the results from one of the talks, it seems that even for the buckets far away, we might be getting something deterministic because of this stable nodes. We actually didn't take it into account, so that's something very interesting to also see. But yeah, so basically, if we do this kind of on-the-path approach, the further away you are from the CID, the more secure is it, because it's much more difficult for an attacker to kind of eclipse, a large bucket. But at the same time, you're also less likely to get the information. So it will work. So the further away you go, it will work only for the very popular files.
It also seems that depending on which point of the network you request, the CID, the paths will be different, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that will make that a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but great work.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah.
So Naveen is offering eclipsing as a service, basically. So there are, for example, blacklists for some of the gateway providers to not serve content. And one could extend this and say, okay, if we really don't want content on the network, we could eclipse it. So it's not bad then.
Right. So I mean, you might think, kind of good use cases for this, because if there's some harmful content, we can say, hey, let's eclipse it. However, the problem is that you're giving a gun to kind of anyone who wants it. This is probably not a good idea. However, I don't know, maybe we could, we're thinking about, kind of there can be a list of files that you don't want to participate in sharing, and then you just, don't do it yourself. But I think actively, kind of eclipsing a specific CID is probably off the limit.
Yeah. As a second question, is your code open source?
Sorry, say again?
Is the code open source?
No. So we probably want to first to kind of have the kind of robust, because now that the code is kind of you provide the CID, you run the script, and it disappears. So yeah, we'll probably want to first have a response.
Yeah, we'll have to see how we handle that more generally. But yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay, one more.
So just to follow up after what Joao was saying, how difficult is it to create an actual Eclipse attack? So I think there's a protection in the code that, so you cannot have more than 3 IP addresses in your whole routing table from the same ISP, or like the same IP block, and 2 inside the same bucket. So it means that to have an actual Eclipse attack, you'd need at least 10 IP addresses, right? So yeah, even if generating the keys is easy, you still need like a lot of IP addresses from different ISPs.
I'm not sure. So I'm not sure because I know that there is this limit of the IPs per bucket, but I don't think you have to add all the peers that you discovered during an operation to your routing table. So you can still use them. If you discover K closest nodes to the CID, you don't necessarily have to add them to your routing table to talk to them.
Yeah, but what I mean is you cannot replace, so because the nodes are going to eclipse like a couple of nodes, so you get closer and you try to remove the nodes that know about the target CID.
Oh, I understand.
But it's hard to remove them because they have diversity in the IP address, whereas the attacker is not likely to have diversity of IP addresses.
Got it. So that's weird because we run it from a single IP address and it works.
In the actual network?
Or in the actual network,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
interesting.
yeah, but it would be, yeah, that's should kind of protect against it. So yeah, that's something to check.
Yeah. Okay.
But even if, 20 IP addresses, probably it's not the
Yeah, sure.
extreme cost, but yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Any final question, or should we just go next door? I think we can, let's thank Michal again.